The day I stop talking about Cookie Run Ovenbreak is going to be a very dark day indeed. This isn't the first time, and it certainly won't be the last, as it's my favourite mobile game by far. Cookie Run is an auto-running 2D platformer where you just run from the beginning to the end of levels with a series of different cookies, which come with a wide range of abilities. And let me tell you, the roster is huge. I just had a quick look, and based on the indicators, there's 189 cookies, 195 pets, 110 treasures, 100 cards, and 24 skills. Now, on the cookies front, that's not even counting all the special edition cookies that only come for a limited time. They don't happen often, but there have been times in the past where I'm pretty sure you could have gotten Hello Kitty, you could have gotten Cookie Droid, which I do have, and it's just kind of crazy to me, really, how many different cookies there are. And sure, while some abilities are fairly similar to each other, the wide range that they've managed to get from this expansive set, which, because you always run with a combination of cookies, pets, and treasures, which when you combine these different cookies, pets, and treasures together create an almost seemingly infinite amount of possibilities, it means that there's always something new going on It means that there's always something different going on, that while the main gameplay loop always remains the same, reacting to all the different obstacles and catching as many jellies as you can, the general gameplay around it always changes up in a way to keep things fresh. And I just love the character design of the different cookies. It's kind of impressive to me that they are still whipping up, I think, 2 new cookies every single month, and they still manage to keep them looking as good as they do. Dev Sisters puts a lot of time into this, and as well, it's not even just Ovenbreak. There are new cookies coming out all the time in the likes of Kingdom, and there's also Cookie Wars, which had a bunch of exclusive cookies as well. And of course, they've been bringing back old cookies from the original Cookie Run. It's kind of wild to me how they're able to have such a huge roster of different characters. Not to mention that, but there's so many different game types as well. There's stuff like the cookie trials, where when you unlock a cookie and a pet, you end up being able to play their specific trial and get rewards for doing exceptionally well. There are title and special events which regularly change. There's the main breakout mode, which is my favourite part of the game, where you run with 10 to 20 cookies and just try to get as far as you can and rack up the highest score that you can, which means that every week you end up getting a big reward. At least I tend to get a big reward at this point, which means that once I'm done, I'm always unlocking a cookie or 2 afterwards. There's the trophy race mode, where you race against several other people to get the highest score you possibly can. There's the Champions and Grand Champions League. There's the main story, which I haven't played a whole lot yet, but it's definitely something on my to-do list because I love playing this game. There's the raid run, where you end up against a big boss enemy and you have to collect these little power-ups to attack the enemy, and hopefully you deplete their health before time runs out. There's the guild runs, where you help your guild out against other guilds by, again, getting the best score you possibly can. There's the Island of Memories, which is sadly a long neglected game mode, which is such a shame because it's one of the ones that I think has so much potential. It had like full-blown cutscenes that weren't just the text boxes that they usually use nowadays. Don't get me wrong, I'm perfectly fine with the visual novel approach that they go with cutscenes, but these were like actually semi-animated, and I just wish that we got to see more of it. Unfortunately, Island of Memories now, I don't think it's been updated in a very long time. And you've got the technical license. It's too difficult for me because I'm not very good at video games, so I've not beaten it. But the point is, there's so many different things to do. I've got most of the cookies already, I'm very close to getting all the pets as well, and I just love collecting in this game. When it comes to their gacha system, the game is often so generous that once you've played to a certain extent, I find that you're practically having the cookies thrown at you at that point. There's only ever been one time in history that I ever spent money on the game, and that's because I wanted Cookie Droid so badly, and it was a limited time event. Aside from that, I've never spent money on this game because I've never felt compelled to, which I know is kind of flying in the face of which I know is probably not what Dev Sisters wants to hear, but I'm saying it because one of the things that turns me away from most mobile games is how they try everything they can to suck the money from you like a vampire sucking blood from you. And Cookie Run doesn't do that. not to the same extent anyway. Yes, they've got plenty of times where they'll beg you for money, but I never feel like I'm put in a situation where I have to give them cash. And I've managed to still build up an impressive library of cookies. Because of that, and the fun gameplay, it's a game that I keep coming back to again and again and again. And if you're looking for a mobile game experience and this looks fun to you, then I'd highly recommend checking it out. Honestly, it's so super fun. I really enjoy playing it. Yeah, check out Cookie Run Ovenbreak. It's completely free to download on your phone. I found out that the Google Play Games store is now on PC, so if you want to play it on PC, you actually can now. So that's how you're seeing a lot of the footage on screen right now, is because I was actually like, oh shoot, you can play this on PC now? Yes, score! And yeah, I highly recommend checking it out, because this experience has been baked to perfection. Okay, so before I talk about this year's WWE game, let me talk about last year's WWE game, because due to the fact that I go by a 2-year plan with wrestling games, I've spent a lot more time with this one. So now to quickly explain the 2-year plan, well, the servers are open 2 years, and if you look at the next year's game and you think, oh, there's some great features that they've added to next year's game, chances are that'll carry over to the game afterwards. So every 2 years when the servers are about ready to kick me out, I pack my bags and I move on to the next one. So the next game I'll be sinking hundreds of hours into will be 2K24. Now 2K22 was a game I was praying would be good. After going from 2K18 to 2K20 and then quickly retreating from 2K20 to 2K19, I was desperate for the future of wrestling games to not look so bleak. And I stayed on 2K19 for a lot longer than I thought, as 2K22 was delayed to allow further development. It was actually a very interesting time. There was no 2K21 in fact, because they outright cancelled it to allow more development time. So this is a very interesting case. And was it worth it? Is the game amazing? It's alright, yeah. Like, I don't think it's a game that's really changing the way wrestling games are gonna be played. Like, it just feels like the games have finally got their footing back after the monumental stumble of 2K20. And I know what you're thinking, why don't I play something like AEW Fight Forever, or any of the other indie wrestling games that are coming out? And tell you the truth, I will play them. Honestly, I love playing different wrestling games, but what I get out of the WWE wrestling games is something that really the other wrestling games just can't give me. These are the games that come the closest to matching kayfabe. Like, if we're to believe kayfabe for a second and pretend that wrestling is real, these games are the closest ones that give us that experience. From having to perfect the timing of your reversals for each move, to all the other intricacies of the combat, it's honestly a great time in my opinion. The match variety is generally pretty good as always, though I'm still hungering for some of the matches that have long since left the game, like Buried Alive matches and the like. It's a shame to see when you remember stuff that has been removed over time. But given that 2K have brought back GM mode, it's clear that they're trying to do whatever they can to respond to feedback, delaying games and adding features that they can get away with adding. It seems like they're really trying to go out of their way to give us the best game that they can. And how is GM mode? Actually pretty good in my opinion. I think it's a lot simpler than the ones from the SmackDown vs. Raw games, but I'd say that in this situation, that's a great way to start. It feels like it's something that they can expand upon with future versions of the GM mode, and I had a blast trying it out. The graphics as always are pretty good, and of course the main way that I like to use the game, the creation suite, is great as ever. There's been some tweaks here and there. One of the more notable ones I found coming from 2K19 was that now when it comes to body selection, you now can't just create this ultra customized body anymore, which I think is a downgrade, honestly. They tried to go for this approach where you just pick a body type and work from there. And don't get me wrong, they've picked a wide range of body types, but there's also situations where there isn't enough variety. Like when you go to the really large body types, you can either go for eat a couple of Whoppers, eats 3 Big Macs a day, eats 300 Big Macs a day. And it's like, okay, there needs to be some in between here. Like, this is a bit of a leap. And they also removed custom entrance creation, which to me, that was another great thing. Listen, I may not be the prime audience for these games, as all I like to do is create custom wrestlers on this thing. And it was such a shame to see some of these features taken away. But with that said, none of the main features that, hinge my enjoyment of the game were removed, and I've been getting a lot of enjoyment, just dicking around making custom wrestlers and, having crazy matches. And of course, on the gameplay front, because I suppose it matters if you're wondering if the game plays well or not. The game, if you're used to other WWE games, plays pretty darn well. I've had fun with it. I played the showcase mode. I've had great times with my friend Sam. We once again did the tradition of picking a wrestler to try and beat Brock Lesnar with. I picked Farouk, aka Ron Simmons, and let me tell you, that match had two very different perspectives. From Sam, it was just a hopeless endeavor as he kept squishing me into oblivion. But for me, it was a heroic, fight against the inevitable as I kept clawing back. I kicked out at the last possible frame and I just screamed into the mic. Oh, it was an amazing time. And so how can I hate the game for that? The game isn't perfect. Obviously, there's stuff I'd like them to add back again. Obviously, there was stuff I wanted to have back, and stuff that I wish that they would add already, but overall, the main package is still really good, and it really gave me hope for when I was waiting for 2K23, and of course waiting for 2K24, for the future of the games, as it seemed like they were finally on a stable trajectory. Would 2K23 continue that path? Well, you'll just have to wait for that review. But overall, I'd say 2K22, well, maybe a little outdated now, given we're, on the road to 2K24, it's still a fun experience, and maybe one to check out. WWE 2K23 reminded me that my 8-year-old computer might be struggling to run the latest games. I mean, if it wasn't already obvious by the fact that one of my most popular shorts is about getting 2K22 to run properly, 2K23 has the weird optimization where, if I run it at 720p, typically I can run it pretty smoothly. But, even at top settings, I can go ultra 720p, perfect. 1080p, lowest the graphic settings can go, weird, slightly sluggish, don't know what's going on. Point is, please become a member, or maybe even donate some money, that'd be great. I can get the computer upgraded. Yes, I'm begging. No, I have no shame. Please help. I mean, you've probably seen the GPU prices. Oh god, do I need help. Not only that, but jeez, are they getting big now. The games for years have been hovering around the 40 to 50 range, with 2K22 just eking over with 51.92 gigabytes on my computer. 79.67 gigabytes. 2K23, what are you doing? That is way too much space to be taking in my hard drive. I know I'm spending a lot of time here, just talking about specs, but the only other game I've got installed that's bigger is the Master Chief Collection, and that's 4 or 5 games. I haven't launched it yet at the time of recording this. Okay, but onto the game itself. Now, the game, pretty good once again. Now, I admittedly have spent far less time with this than I did with 2K22. Oh, just look at those numbers, amateur hour. But I'd like to think that I've spent enough time now with 2K23 to say that I can generally give it a good rundown. Honestly, if you enjoyed 2K22 and you wondered about moving to 2K23, it's a perfectly good upgrade. Visually, the game has definitely seen an upgrade. In fact, now you can even choose the model quality to choose these higher quality ones, and yeah, there's a very noticeable improvement with the models, honestly. All these John Cenas look bloody lovely, honestly. Now, I don't know for certain, but the controls to me generally felt similar enough to 2K22 that I can generally go back and forth without too much issue. My one gripe is, with reversals, I'm used now to the Y button appearing, overhead. That's how, 99% of the moves are, It appears overhead, you know when to mash it. You won't get it the first few times, but, once you get the timing down, you're pretty much dead on to getting it a lot of the time. But then, sometimes the moves will pop the Y button down at the bottom of the screen, and it's no, you can't do that. I've been trained all my life to focus on the top of my character's head. You can't make me suddenly switch to that. Half the time when that happens, I don't notice it because my eyes are trained somewhere else on the screen. It's a really bad design, honestly, and I really hope they fix that, because that is absolutely something that does me in a lot of the time. Of course, with 2K23 came the inclusion of the War Games match, and oh, that was a much needed inclusion. I love when the wrestling games start bringing in these major gameplay modes. You know, back in the day, it was like the Steel Cage and the Hell in a Cell, and then, you know, like, obviously the Royal Rumble match was a big deal, but that's been in wrestling games for decades at this point. And to have War Games show up is a pretty big deal. Honestly, I'm really glad to see it added in, and overall, I'd say it worked pretty well. Like, I had fun with it at least. Overall, 2K23 I'd say is another recommendation for me, because again, it just gives me everything that I'd look for in one of these wrestling games, and the Create an Entrance is back! Thank you, we're getting somewhere. Maybe have create a video, not be so balked, or maybe just go all the way with it and let us just create a story, you know, that'd be nice. Maybe add that to 2K24. I know 2K24 is like, oh god, it's in a few months, isn't it? But it's a fun time. I do recommend don't be in my situation and play 2K22 and 2K23 back to back, because it makes it very hard to find stuff to say. The rest of WWE games definitely seem to be on the right track once again. If they're not your thing, then these aren't going to suddenly change your mind. But if these are what you were looking for, if you enjoyed the games since like WWE 12 onwards, then you're probably going to enjoy this one. But if you haven't got the game yet, then I'd honestly recommend waiting for 2K24, because I imagine that game will offer a lot of the creature comforts, and a lot more. Garten of Banban is like The Room in so much as that it's really bad to the point that some people found it funny, but it would also be like if they then made a sequel to The Room, where Tommy Wiseau is suddenly very aware that people are memeing on it, and decided to be more tongue-in-cheek, completely missing the point of why people found it funny in the first place. I remember when Chapter 1 came out, everyone was just kind of enthralled that it existed. I mean, regardless of your opinions on some of the different horror games that have come out over time, such as Five Nights at Freddy's, Bendy and the Ink Machine, Poppy Playtime, Tattletale, these games all at least had some obvious effort put into them, some obvious talent and craft that went into it. Garten of Banban just didn't. Now, I'm not saying that like I could do any better, but good lord, this is a real product. It's safe to say I didn't find any of it scary at all. Chapter 1 had basically nothing. It had the same problems as Poppy Playtime Chapter 1, except at least with Poppy Playtime, the chase of Huggy Wuggy could get the heart racing a little bit. I didn't feel much of anything dealing with Bird Up over here. And then Chapter 2 comes along, and it's, I guess, better. It's bigger, there was more stuff to do, they introduced more of the characters, and tried to give you different things to do, but so much of it felt like a farce at times. Such as the whole thing with Banbalina, where you're in this school and you just go around picking stuff up whenever you're in a break time, which feels weird, like what's the point? And then you have to answer these quizzes, which is probably one of the closest times the game has to actually being semi-funny, now that it's trying to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, aware that no one's finding this scary. But otherwise, it's just not that great. Stuff like the spider chase is reminiscent of the Bird Up chase. I'm going to go with the majority and agree that the bird is probably the most interesting of the characters, because at least it does something other than just attack you or go on long diatribes. In terms of scares, I don't think there was really anything that scared me, except for one thing, and that was the giant, towering, like, monolith, which never got explained. I don't remember a single explanation in Chapter 2, maybe I missed it. Maybe I glazed over so much while playing it that I just didn't catch the explanation of this horrific entity as it just stood there menacingly. That was pretty intimidating. And because it was less is more. It wasn't saying that it was going to eat my spleen or something like that. It just stood there, ominously, and you were wondering, oh, is it going to do something? You know, when is it going to do something? Turns out the answer was never. Chapter 2 just has it standing there and that's it, but, you know, it got me. The graphics generally look like this is some claymation project, which, had that been intentional, I would call it a genius move, but it obviously is not, so everything just looks weird. None of it makes sense, and it just gets to the point where, after I finished Chapter 2, I just refunded the game. And I know people made a meme out of trying to refund the game, but at that point, I just gave up with Garten of Banban. I remember early on I considered following the story along, see how insane it got, but by the end of Chapter 2, I realised that it was just not worth my time. I think they've released chapters since then, they might be on Chapter 3 or 4 by now, but I just don't care. There's nothing in this for me. It's not scary, it's not intriguing, it's not even funny anymore. This has to be one of the worst games I played this year. It just sucks, and while it did feel like the devs were trying to get something vaguely interesting together, I just don't think they should have put this game out there, at least not for money. This feels like something I could have played for free. Is it the death of mascot horrors like some people say? No, mascot horrors will continue going on. Five Nights at Freddy's getting a movie shows that the genre is still very much alive and well and might even be going on to greater strength, as Five Nights at Freddy's becomes more immortalized, now venturing even further out of its legacy than just in video games. But it's definitely going to be seen as more of a fumble of a footnote. Don't get this one. I know there's a market of people who buy things to be ironic, but I don't think it's worth even that. So I played Sort the Court, a game that you can find on itch.io by Graham Borland. The game itself is entirely free. It's a name your own price type of thing, but you can download it entirely for free. And honestly, I thought it was kind of fun. If a little repetitive, well, let's get into it. So the entire gimmick of the game is that you run a kingdom, but everything that comes up to you, you could only answer with yes or no. And immediately, I was kind of grabbed by this. It's a simple concept that brings me back to the days of like Newgrounds Flash games where, they would take a simple idea and, really stretch to see how far it could go, and it could be really exciting. But at the same time, when you put yourself in such confines, it can restrict what you can do, so I was definitely interested to see if the game would sink or swim. Now, throughout the game, many different characters will come up to you. Some of them are going to have long, intricate storylines, and some of them will just show up to ask for a coin or to give you a coin. You have to juggle, increasing the population of your town, maintaining their happiness, and of course, making sure that you got plenty of gold coins in order to do the above. And while at first juggling the three can be a little bit difficult, sometimes you'll be asked to give too much gold and end up in the red. Sometimes people will offer you to get some gold back, but in exchange for a few souls. It's all a balancing act, but as time goes on, you find yourself more and more comfortably getting along. In fact, I gotta say, I really didn't have much trouble with this game, if any, really. I quickly ended up reaching a certain point that I could easily deal with most problems without much issue. Oh, I ended up spending a bit too much money? That's okay, I can sacrifice a couple people. I'm going to end up with more people at the end of it anyway, because the game will say that my kingdom is growing, so it ends up balancing itself out. And when that happens, it does end up losing some of its teeth. Now there really isn't that concern as much anymore, but the game does still try to throw things at you to keep you on your toes. You'll end up, with a dragon confronting you and you've got to, get that all dealt with. You'll end up with this science group which promises you all these different things like an infinite gold generator, and you end up having to wait it out, constantly funding their expeditions to, keep working on the tech and to see if it works out or not. And of course, the main goal of the game, which is to join like this group of royalty where all the different kings and queens help each other out. And that in itself is the ultimate goal. Once you do that, you've beaten the game. But of course, with stuff like the dragon thing that was still lingering, even though I beat the game itself in an hour, I did stick around for a half hour more. Because even though the game was ridiculously easy, I was curious to see what would happen with some of the lingering stories. Would we be able to beat the dragon? What would happen with some of the scientific experiments? They mentioned a Project Lupin, and I was curious to see what would come of it. All that to say, this is a fun little game, given that it's completely free and it's only going to take like about an hour of your time. I'd say I highly recommend it. There are some things that I would love to see if something like this were ever to be expanded upon. I'd love there to be more room for failure. It felt like too many times the game was ready to catch me and put me back on my feet. There seemed to be... I don't know if there is a fail state, but it seems like you'd really have to work to make the game fail you, if it did. Now, unfortunately, Sort the Court isn't in active development, so me suggesting that is only if someone were to ever make like a similar type of game. and plus, of course, I'd love to see if there'd be more things. While the main stuff still kept me hooked, some of the people that you see do get a little repetitive after a while. So it would have been nice if there'd be more interactions. But again, this is nitpicking, as at the end of the day, I still had a good little short time with Sort the Court. Sure, there's ways that it can be improved, but that can be said about anything, and overall, with a positive experience, this is one that I would highly recommend checking out. There'll be a link in the pinned comments. Okay, so LEGO Builder's Journey is an experience that, as I look back at it more and more, I'm not sure that I can recommend. Now, this is a game that I've been wanting to play for a while, as I got it for free from the Epic Games Store. So I booted it up, and even with my tiny little brain, I managed to beat the game in 2 hours. And the story wasn't exactly what I was expecting. Based on the beginning, I thought this was going to be just a simple, like, parent-child relationship thing, you know, about how the parent ends up getting distant from the child due to work, but you can tell that both of them want to, like, be together and, you know, do fun things, you know, when they want to, because they were exploring in the beginning, and, you know, suddenly they're being pulled apart, you know, by the real world, and the child starts to escape by building stuff on their own, but, like, it takes some weird turns. There's like a, you know, you build a robot. I don't want to spoil it too much in case someone wants to play it. It's not too crazy. It just took some turns that I really didn't expect. But overall, I had a decent time with the story. Now, on the puzzles front, none of the puzzles are true head scratchers. Like, none of them are really going to stop you in your tracks and make you think, I have no idea what's going on. Except for if you're like me and 1 or 2 of the mechanics didn't get explained to you very well while you were playing, and you just kind of were stumped as to what the game was expecting from you. The game goes for a zero dialogue approach, which, don't be wrong, I do like it, and none of those roadblocks were such that I just couldn't get past. I managed to get past everything, but there are definitely 1 or 2 times where I was just kind of like, okay, Gabe, I don't know what you want from me. But overall, once you figure something out, the puzzles are all generally pretty easy. Visually, the game is trying to go for like that kind of simple aesthetic that a lot of indie games tried to do back in the day. I think of games like Thomas Was Alone when it comes to just trying to capture that simple style and trying to tell a big story with, you know, different emotion in it, you know, whilst keeping it simple. And it sort of works. It, you know, I can tell that they've really tried here, but there's also just part of my brain that's not willing to fully connect to it. And I can't tell if it's just that the emotion isn't coming through as well as strongly as it could have in another art style, or if it's just a case of me seeing Lego and just immediately thinking, haha, funny brick game. Like, don't misunderstand me. Apart from one problem, which I'm about to get into, I really didn't have any major problems with the game. Generally speaking, the game was alright. I'd say my major problem with the game came in that so many times I would try to place something, and the cursor you can see perfectly well when you're going to grab a brick, but the moment you grab that brick, suddenly your cursor disappears, and the game can get a little fiddly with where it wants you to place things. You know, suddenly you could be right on top of where you want to place it, but the game says, nah, not on my watch. So you end up having to let go, grab, and then suddenly it'll connect. It happened way too many times for my liking. Like, given this is Lego, the whole point is building, it shouldn't be so fiddly. Now, I was obviously curious about this game because it's unlike any Lego game I think we've seen in like the past few decades. They'll sometimes try some different things, but they usually all have that general basis that they've been working on for decades now, so to see something so fundamentally different really did strike me. And before recording this review, I decided to take a look at what the actual price was, because just because I got it for free doesn't mean it's going to go on for free again. And it turns out it's $16. I'm guessing about $20 for the American crowd, and I can't recommend it for that. That's $10 an hour if you're going by my strats, and you can absolutely get this game beaten even quicker. There's a creative mode afterwards, but I mean, it's a Lego game. I kind of expect that, really. I kind of expect a level of creativity. I don't know, like, this is a fun game, but $16 just seems like too much. Overall, it's not a bad experience, but maybe not one that I'd ever replay again. I've had my time with it, and now it'll remain a part of my memories. And something that I just cannot recommend. If I were to ever create a top 10 favourite games of all time list, I feel Spider-Man 2000 for the PS1, Nintendo 64, Dreamcast and PC would have to be on that top 10 list. It would share a spot with Spider-Man Remastered for PS4, PS5 and PC, but for different reasons. The 2000 Spider-Man game is a very nostalgic experience for me. The gameplay is good enough for the time. You know, it's nothing compared to some of the modern experiences you can get nowadays, but whenever I play it, it's so comfy and familiar that I just have a good time while playing it. The only bit that I really don't enjoy all too much is the actual combat, because I usually just find myself avoiding as much combat encounters as I possibly can, especially as some of the later enemies end up being really just kind of bullshit, to be honest with you. The lizards can already take off huge chunks of health, but are able to be cheesed somewhat, but the symbiotes, oh no, I do not like messing with them at all. I avoid them every chance I get, because they have so much health, they are big damage sponges, and can rip away your health in an instant. I have far less problems, however, with the boss fights. Each boss fight has a different gimmick to it. With Rhino, you have all these different things that you can send Rhino into as you try to bait him into running into like these electrical things, into the walls, into exploding barrels. With Scorpion, you throw everything in the office at him to deal massive damage. With the Mysterio fight, it's a multi-layered fight where you have to attack him all over as he's made himself out to be massive. 5'11" versus 6 foot over here. The Doc Ock fight can be a little bit tedious, as you have to kind of wait for these little switches to appear, and once you flick them all off, then you can beat Doc Ock up, but it's a good endurance test as you try to avoid taking damage for as long as you can. And then there's the Carnage fight, where, in my opinion, taking damage is almost a necessity to be able to bait Carnage in, and then knock it into the bubble. You bait Carnage in, grab a health pickup, and smack them into this fire and sonic wave bubble. There's obviously more, like the Monster Rock fight, which you don't even fight. That's probably the wrong word to use. You actually just run away from Monster Rock. And it's honestly a thrilling bit of chase, especially for younger me, because Monster Rock is always right behind you. Like, they did a great job at having the rubber banding such that Monster Rock is always on your case, making it so that you always feel like you just got by the skin of your teeth. The game is such that I've played the game over and over and over again, playing it on every format that I can. I'd call the Nintendo 64 version the weakest because it has no cutscenes, instead using slideshows, which, given that most of the cutscenes seem to be using borderline in-game graphics, I feel totally could have been done on the Nintendo 64, but there we are. The PS1 version is my personal favourite, but I'd say that if you were looking for the definitive experience, if you can get the mod to stop the PC version from running too fast, then that is the version to go for in my opinion. Though the Dreamcast version isn't too shabby either. The story in my opinion isn't too much to note about, as it's clearly just an excuse to reel in as many villains as they could manage, and there's a whole rogues gallery. I didn't even mention the fact that Venom is a notable character in the story. Basically, Spider-Man gets framed for stealing Dr. Octavius' tech. Because of that, Eddie Brock becomes Venom, thinking that Spider-Man screwed him over and whatnot. It's just crazy, really. And the symbiotes and Carnage and Monster Rock all happen because Doc Ock's ultimate plan is to control the symbiotes for world domination. It's all largely in service of making sure that each level has a different landscape to it, and different scenarios going on. One level you'll be running over to the Daily Bugle to help J. Jonah Jameson, and the next you're running for your life as this police copter is shooting enough missiles to wipe even the US military budget at you, and dodging sniper fire. Which, the sniper fire is also pretty easy to cheese once you know what's going on. The only level that I really hate in this game is the elevator one, because the symbiotes are absolutely great at wiping out your health, and so you need to have the best reflexes. You need to have the route down to a science when you go to hit those switches to get out of there. Otherwise, the symbiotes will absolutely destroy your health before you have a chance of getting back to safety. And don't bother finding them, like I said, they will destroy you before you can destroy them. And this is probably one of the main parts of the game which really shows some of the ways that the game
controls aren't really perfect. In tight, confined areas like this, where there's a million things that Spider-Man can target onto, you see it just going all over the place, not targeting quite the thing you want, and there was like 1 or 2 times where I'd web swing at something and it didn't latch on for whatever reason. It's perfectly fine 99% of the time, it just had a few slip-ups here and there, with the elevator level being the worst of it. Visually, the game is honestly great for the time period. It does its best to try and capture the look and feel of Spider-Man with the limitations of PS1, Dreamcast, and N64 technology. And it's such that even now, obviously while it's showing its age, I still think it looks nice, and I don't have as much of a problem looking at it as opposed to other games from its period. If you couldn't tell already, this game is absolutely clouded with nostalgia for me. There are better Spider-Man experiences out there, but this one, for its time, was absolutely an amazing game in my opinion, and is one that I just still love to play and enjoy and reminisce about. And if you like games from that time period, I highly recommend checking it out. And go and enjoy some PS1 web slinging. I've played Sonic Forces more times than I'd care to admit, and to be honest with you, this is probably the most positive review you're going to get out of me for Sonic Forces. Don't get me wrong, I still think it's a bad game, but I think it's a little bit more nuanced than I would have said before. The gameplay is split between 3 different characters. You have Modern Sonic, Classic Sonic, and your own original character. The Modern Sonic stages are honestly where some of the gameplay shines the most. The levels, generally speaking, aren't that amazingly designed, apart from a few exceptions here and there, but the gameplay has definitely been tweaked since Sonic Generations, with the homing attack being far more responsive. Just in general, the gameplay for the most part was pretty good. Apart from some baffling situations here and there, 9 times out of 10, the gameplay was actually pretty nice. My biggest problem was that I just wish we had some more dynamic and interesting levels. Visually, the levels had a lot more going on to make the levels more interesting and generally more memorable, but I wish the gameplay was beefed up to match. A lot of the time the level design is far less interesting than what you would see in Sonic Generations. Classic Sonic, meanwhile, is easily the lowlight of the entire experience for me. And this isn't like with Sonic Generations where it was still good, but just not as good as the modern Sonic stuff. This is a case where I actually think the classic Sonic stuff was really bad. Like, there were so many times when I was playing with the 2D controls, and I don't know what they've done to them, but there were so many times where I messed up a jump, and I was like, okay, this is getting ridiculous now. I never had this problem with Classic Sonic and Sonic Generations. This is a bit ridiculous. And just in general, the Classic Sonic stages just became something that I dreaded every time I saw that little light blue icon appear. Every time I saw that, I knew it was going to be a Classic Sonic stage, and I knew that I was just going to have to grit my teeth and bear it to get to the other 2/3 of the game, which I found much more appealing. The other third being the original character, and this is definitely the standout feature in Sonic Forces, as you get to create your own original character, customize it however you want, with a whole litany of different weapons that you can try out, some of them being more useful than others, which we'll get into that. And honestly, I think this was a really smart idea. Sega knows their audience. They know that original characters for Sonic are ubiquitous, so giving a feature where you can create your own character is honestly really smart. And it's something that, much like the Chow Garden, I think it should just be a feature that they include in as many Sonic games as they possibly can. Which, by the way, yes, I am one of the many who wants the Chow Garden back. Now, in terms of the weapons that the original character gets to have, there was a few that I got to try out. The flame weapon is pretty good. There was a lightning one, which I remember was pretty nice. There was a cube one, which I felt was a bit too situational at times. You had to get way too close to the enemies at times if you wanted to do multiple at once. There was a drill weapon, which in 2D spaces was so overpowered, but in 3D spaces was basically a death sentence to use. And then there was this one where you had clones of yourself, which was so OP that I absolutely destroyed a boss or two with it. Like, it's so much more powerful than everything else I used in the game that I only ended up changing the weapons just because I wanted to experiment some more. You can also replay levels with Shadow the Hedgehog and Super Sonic, but they're not really any different than just playing with modern Sonic, so I don't really know why you would want to go back unless you really love Shadow the Hedgehog that much. As for the levels themselves,
For the most part, when you're doing the modern / original character levels, they're okay. Like, they're nothing too special. They're definitely far less interesting than some of the levels we got in Sonic Generations, with a notable exception here or there. The Metropolis levels aren't just a situation where they look better like the rest of Sonic Forces, these actually generally play better and are far more interesting, such as a level which is probably the best showcase of the villain Infinite that we get the entire game in my opinion, but just in general far more interesting gameplay-wise. I don't know who designed the Metropolis stages, but they probably should have designed the rest of the game too while they were at it. Or if they did design the rest of the game's levels, they should have designed it to this level, because this was by far some of the best stuff the game had to offer. If Sonic Generations 2 ever got made, then they would have to take a lot of stuff from Metropolis to represent Sonic Forces, because this was the highlight of the game in my opinion. But overall, gameplay-wise, despite my compliments, I genuinely just didn't find it all that engaging a lot of the time. The classic Sonic stuff, like I said, dragged the whole experience down. The boss fights I didn't find all that engaging at all, apart from the Death Egg robot towards the very end of the game. Everything else just felt so lifeless? Like, I don't know how else to describe it. There's a fight you have with Zavok, there's a fight you have with Metal Sonic, there's a fight you have with Infinite himself, there's actually multiple, and I can't say that I really took much from it. They're so easy, and there's not really that much iconic about them. It seems that they were simply trotted out for nostalgia value, which doesn't make any sense in this situation. I really wish that they'd spent more time just focusing on Infinite. Because every time it feels like they're pulling a Sonic Generations, it actually feels like it's dragging itself down somewhat. The music, much like the rest of the game, is also very hit and miss. Some of the tracks are really actually quite good, while some of them, especially the classic Sonic stuff, I really did not like. I don't know what it is, but classic Sonic really is just the worst part of this game just overall. Like, if they chopped that out, I feel like I'd be a lot more positive to this game. Graphically, the game is just actually really good. Like, this is one part that I can't fault at all. Like, for the gameplay, which can be hit and miss, with the music that for the most part is alright, but sometimes it does have a few misses here and there, the graphics just in general look really nice. They've gone out of their way to make sure that the levels are all visually very interesting, with a lot going on in the background. It just makes each level stand out just that little bit more as a spectacle. The only bit that I really don't like is that the characters all feel a little bit more washed out. The colours are definitely more muted as opposed to other games like Sonic Generations. Otherwise, I don't really have a bad thing to say about the graphics. After I beat the game, I did go on to Episode Shadow, and man, I wish this was longer than 3 levels, because 2 of these levels are some of the most interesting that the game has, easily standing up next to Metropolis as some of my favourite parts of the game. Obviously, this is just a part where it's all modern Sonic style gameplay, so it's already off to a great start with the improved controls, but it also feels like on top of the levels just looking nice, they actually went out of their way to make sure each level was designed in a way that it felt more interesting to play. It didn't feel like I was just kind of mindlessly boosting along with a few jumps here and there. There felt, a lot of the times, I needed to time my jumps just right, otherwise I was going to take damage. The levels were still very short, but it felt more engaging, and I just wish we had more like that. Unfortunately, Episode Shadow really shouldn't be a separate option because there's only 3 levels. I beat the thing in less than 15 minutes. It's honestly a little insulting that it's its own separate thing, making you think like it's going to be this whole experience and then it's over before you even know it. Again, it's also another interesting use of Infinite because while there's no cutscenes, which really is another absolute... it annoys me, but during the levels, they'll have these moments where Infinite is interfering, pretending to be Rouge and Omega, and it's so good to see like the ways that Infinite can mess with you, even if you don't see it happening. This is something that they absolutely could have put into the main game. Like when Shadow appears in the main story, they could have then had you flashback to playing Episode Shadow. That would have been better. Overall, this is a game that has so many parts that work really well. You know, the modern Sonic gameplay is much improved. The modern Sonic controls have been improved. Some of the levels are really engaging, the visuals are better than Generations, the music can be pretty nice, but then there are so many things that bog it down. The classic Sonic stuff sucks, the classic Sonic music sucks, there are some weapons with the original characters that are completely unusable most of the time, the boss fights aren't very interesting. It's just, overall, it's a bit of a mess. The parts where the game shines so brightly that when you play the bits that suck about the game, it really just puts you in a bit of a bad mood. And as I've been talking about this, it reminds me why me and my friends who were into Sonic were so disappointed by this game's release, because as we discussed at the time, there was so much promise, but I don't think we could really articulate what we had on our minds. And while I gotta keep this review somewhat short for VGcember, yeah, like, there is so much that could have been improved. And the fact that it's so close to actually being a somewhat good experience is what makes it all the more frustrating. I don't think it's the worst Sonic game of all time. Like, I've heard some people bandy that around. I don't think that's true. Like, it has some bad moments, but this is more just a game that's frustrating. It's a 5 out of 10 experience, maybe a 6. That should have been like an 8 or a 9. It has the tools to do it. Don't get this game, I don't recommend it. There is a few things here and there that I enjoy, but overall the experience just isn't worth your time. There are infinitely more experiences out there in the Sonic library.
You ever look back at the shovelware you used to play as a kid? Well, that's what I did when I decided to play Rollercoaster World for the PlayStation 2. Now, if you play games like Rollercoaster Tycoon or Planet Coaster, then you already know what you're dealing with this game. You build a theme park, you put little rides in, you build roller coasters, or in this case, a roller coaster, and you know, you just generally try to make the park profitable. So why don't we start off with the positives, shall we? The roller coaster feature is actually surprisingly complex. Like, you let to build fully fledged roller coasters. There's even and once you've invested enough money, which by the way you invest to make upgrades, then eventually you get a train that will not fall off the track no matter what you do, so you can, when you have enough cash, just build the most insane roller coasters you've ever seen. Here's some that the devs left in, is like a quick ride feature where you can just go through some of the ones they made, and you can see that you can go absolutely mental without risking the train falling off, which is great because this game will not allow you to have the train fall off. The game just won't allow that, and I think that's great overall, just to let you go kind of nuts. They also let you ride the rides, and we'll be getting back to one of them. It's such a stupid feature, but I find it weirdly endearing nonetheless. Apart from that, the game is very simple. As long as you juggle your profit to investment ratio, then you're going to absolutely crush this game. You just place down buildings, build a roller coaster, sort out your investments, which is actually surprisingly easy. Like, once you've fully researched a certain field, it will automatically stop spending money in that area, meaning you can just then move those funds over to something else, like advertising, which by the end, I just make sure to have 1,000 gold, which is the limit in advertising, to make sure as many people come to the park as possible. As long as you just make sure that you don't go too far in the red, which is very easy to do because you can just see how quickly you're accumulating wealth and make sure that you don't go too far into the red to where you can't recover, which, by the way, if you don't recover in like a week, then you automatically lose. Then it's just basically really easy to make sure that you don't lose. Like, once you get that general footing, you're golden. You're never going to lose this game again. Hell, they even have, like, buildings for some reason, and you can put a skyscraper for 300,000 gold. I don't know why you would, but you can, and I did. And after that, once you've built the roller coaster and done everything else, you just sit there and just wait for the gold to build up until you get a 2 million gold valuation and the credits roll. Well done, you won. You could technically keep on playing, but why would you? You've done everything in the game. Oh, you want to ride the rides? Sure, there you go, look at that. Oh, wow, wee! Do you want to go over to get some food? Oh, look at that, it's a text box telling you that your hot dog was delicious. Isn't this enthralling? One of the only reasons that I'd ever want to come back to here is one thing that I've been neglecting to mention, which is the haunted house.
Oh yeah. Okay, so this game right here, this shovelware PS2 game, is rated 3+. I don't know what it is in the US, but over here, you can be 3 years old and playing it. So you go over to the haunted house, and... oh my goodness, what is this? This is the haunted house. There are several levels where you just look for the exit. Now, I couldn't do that in this version because, oh my god, the screen was way too dark. I couldn't see where I was going, so I couldn't find the way out. And the entire time, there's a ghost, or in some cases ghosts, I'm pretty sure, wandering around. And the closer the ghosts get to you, the more your controller vibrates like a heartbeat. It's honestly something that terrified me as a kid. Like, you think about me when I was like 7 or 8, playing this game, and suddenly, you know, you're seeing these ghosts wandering around in this dark environment. Reverse dialogue is playing in the background, or like... it was terrifying! Like, I don't know what they were thinking. But I will say this, it gives me a reason to revisit it. It also has a challenge mode where they challenge you to build a roller coaster within these specific guidelines. But these guidelines, apart from the G-force, is obviously a little bit... it's a bit hard to tell what exactly the game wants from you sometimes. But generally speaking, it's a fun little distraction. Because again, the roller coaster building is the best part of the game. Like, as a kid... you know, if there was nothing else I was going to do, I was going to build a gigantic roller coaster. Really, if you're going to play this game, those are the only parts I can recommend to you. Is the roller coaster building itself is pretty solid for a budget game, and the haunted house, because Jesus Christ, I want to know who came up with that. Everything else is clearly very low budget. I can't recommend you play this game, generally speaking. If you are going to play it, here's a little fun fact. If you go to Rail Color 2 in the settings, you can turn everything down and make the roller coaster invisible so that the train will be driving on an invisible track. Have fun! You also get random notifications every so often as you build the park that will, you know, give a bonus or take away from the percentage of visitors to your park. You know, if you're doing really well, then you might get a boost, which will mean more gold. Or if you're lacking in something, say you need to build more, put more trees down, more bins, more tickets, more info boards, then you do that as well. Which is why, right at the beginning of the game, what I'll do is I will just grab all the essential things like bins, ticket vending machines, info boards, and I would just rapidly place them at the beginning. Like, that's the thing. There's no real forethought to any of this compared to other roller coaster games where you have to meticulously think everything out. That's why I'm saying, like, everything is paper thin in this except for the roller coaster building. Oh, and if you need any more proof about how scuffed this game can be, the inverted out and back track, the last thing you can unlock in the game, with the last train you can unlock in the game, is impossible to use because it just bugs out. Look at this! What is going on? Oh yeah, one other thing, you can free roam around the environment, and you can see these little NPCs that are like Doom sprites, and you can go up to them, and I didn't get much footage of this, so you might not see any at all as I skim through like hours of footage, but like they generally will let you know how happy they are, which doesn't do anything for you. You can talk to them, and they'll generally either be sad at the beginning, then eventually as you get more and more rich, you get more stuff, they'll be happier. There's some funny dialogue there, because you'll see like a couple that's about to break up if they're miserable, or they'll suddenly be like, oh, I want you to marry me, and I don't know, like, it's such a, I guess it's a nice detail. But yeah, all in all, while I have some nostalgia for this shovelware game, it's definitely not something I could recommend any of you try out. It's got some fun novelties to it, but overall, this game is as paper thin as the open world that you can free roam in. Oh my goodness. It's just a very strange game. Like, it definitely feels like the developers were trying their best with what they had. I imagine that they were under a significant budget because so many of the sound effects and stuff I've heard in other games as well. So I can tell a lot of stuff in this was probably like stock stuff. They probably did not have much time or money to work on this. But man, the rose-tinted glasses come off hard, and apart from the actual main bit of building a roller coaster, there really isn't much reason to go back to this. There's so many good alternatives nowadays. Well, there was good alternatives back then! Indigo Park is the latest game in the mascot horror genre that's taking notes from the likes of Poppy Playtime, Garten of Banban, and Bending the Ink Machine. And before anyone gets insulted that I dare compare Indigo Park to Garten of Banban, that's pretty much how Unique Geese started this whole concept in the first place, recreating Garten of Banban and deciding that instead of, stepping on the toes of the developers of Garten of Banban, would make his own IP. And that's how Indigo Park came about. But what do I think of it? Now, I can't compare it to Bending the Ink Machine, I straight up haven't played that one, but compared to Poppy Playtime and Garten of Banban, it's honestly the strongest chapter 1 of the trio. The first chapter, which is free by the way, is less than an hour long, yet a whole lot has been packed into it. You go around exploring the park while Rambly the raccoon acts as your guide, which the downtime parts of the game, in between the big encounters, yes there's more than one, had some of my favourite and least favourite parts of the game. Rambly's interactions with Lloyd, for instance, were really funny, and honestly, Rambly in general just has a lot of personality, coupled with the cute design animated by Jake Neutron, who as always has done another stellar job, coupled with the voice acting, honestly makes Rambly an immediately likable character, which means that the likely inevitable betrayal in like chapter 3 or 4 is going to be doubly gut-wrenching. The reason that I suspect the betrayal is because, well, Rambly doesn't seem wholly honest with his intentions, and with that insecurity of being alone for so long, I get the feeling that we're gonna see a Monica situation crop up here. Not quite as disturbing, but one where Rambly is gonna do anything he can to, well, get his way. Now, on the aforementioned least favourite parts of this downtime, honestly, I'm not as familiar with this genre as some people, but man, am I starting to see some tropes just from these 3 games. Like, when you get teased the first time by a monster peering back at you, yeah, that can be kind of scary. Like when I found out Huggy Wuggy was staring at me the entire time, it kind of did spook me, and did have me questioning what was going to happen. But now that I'm familiar with the format, that this is just a tease before the big climax, I did not buy into the fear at all whenever Molly would appear, especially because the game really loves having Molly appear. Like, it got a bit comical at times because I just knew this isn't the time. Molly's not going to chase us yet. And because it was so obvious, I just knew that I could just run in the direction of Molly and she would likely despawn before I got to her, so I had nothing to worry about. Honestly, at this point, I would love if Chapter 2 or Chapter 3, depending on how far in development Chapter 2 is. Honestly, I would love for one of these future chapters to just fake me out. Have it appear like it's one of those fake out segments, then if you run too quickly, you get killed. I just need to feel like there's going to be some level of danger to these, because I can't keep being expected to be scared by the tease that later in the line you're going to have a spooky encounter. It doesn't get me anxious anymore. Throughout the game, you can actually tell that it still wears its Garten of Banban inspiration very much on its sleeve, with references to Bird Up, which is a meme made by about Garten of Banban, but also, just by rewatching the recreation of Garten of Banban, you can see many of the lessons taken in that video carrying over.
Original game, I know what they're going for with the whole look of this playground. It's supposed to have these big, like, rubber plastic things that kids can climb on. I remember playing on that kind of stuff as a kid, but as I was doing some research into more liminal and creepy spaces, I kind of got settled, and I had this vivid memory of the play sets that you'd see at, like, McDonald's back in the day. They'd have these big pipes and like you'd have to crawl through them, and honestly they kind of scared me at times. I don't know if I'm like claustrophobic and I just don't know, but like something about being in there and like a kid comes up behind you, it's scary. So I decided to have my version of the playground focus more on the plot. But what if something bad happened in 2016? What if the entire facility was left abandoned in 2016 and the events of my game happened in 2023? This would mean that there would be 7 years between when the building shut down and when you're actually playing the game. So what if these little science experiments that were helping the kids and looking pretty were left alone in a facility with no food, scavenging for 7 years? Poor Jumbo Josh would be left in a dark room for 7 years. His body would begin melting away and deteriorating, but because he's not a natural life form.
The encounter with Lloyd was at first a little bit intimidating because Lloyd's model was actually kind of intimidating, but the actual encounter itself was so goofy that I didn't really find it that scary. but the Molly chase was really where the game hit its stride. Honestly, the fact that I didn't know for certain which way to go, which led to some critical mistakes leading to me to die a few times to Molly, was honestly really good. It felt like what the Huggy Wuggy chase in Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 should have been. Honestly, I really did enjoy that. It was definitely the peak of the experience for me horror-wise. And once again led to another funny rambly moment where he tried to say, no, this is for staff only, realised what was happening, and then just immediately went, come in new staff. Oh my goodness. On the overall scale of did I find the game that scary? It's a little bit. Like, it had some moments that had me a little bit on edge. There were certainly some moments when things got just a little too quiet, and that's when I was actually able to, kind of get alone in my thoughts and really start to hype myself up more than anything. And the chase with Molly was equal parts exhilarating and scary, but I don't think the game ever reaches the heights that I feel like it could. But given that this is the game's free taster, I feel like the future chapters are really going to start to amp things up. And it has left me with enough questions that I am really curious to find out what happens from here on. Like, for instance, what is Rambly's intentions? Is he good? Is he some shade of grey where his intentions are good, but his behaviours certainly aren't? Is he actually secretly evil? Why are the mascots all shooting blood while Rambly is some digital program? Why is that the case? Like, if Molly can bleed, why is she still in the park? Like, stuff like that does have me wondering what's going on there. So will I be playing Chapter 2? Oh, almost certainly. I'll probably end up doing a follow-up review once a few of the chapters come out, just so that I can do a more overall perspective on the game. Also, visually, despite the fact that I did have to crank down the lighting so that OBS would be able to record it at a semi-stable frame rate, the game itself looks beautiful, and despite my earlier comment just then, I promise you, when I'm running the game myself, I can have those settings cranked up and the game runs pretty nicely. Like, it's a pretty friendly game, in my opinion. Like, if it's running decently well on my old computer, that's a pretty good sign. Overall, do I recommend playing Indigo Park? Honestly, I do. Between the charm of the presentation and Rambly himself, alongside some pretty decent horror chases, I'm honestly curious to see where Indigo Park goes next. It feels like the best start any of these episodic horror mascot games have had in recent times. And so, if this is how it starts, I have to wonder what it's going to be like when things amp up. Like, if this is just the beginning, I wager that things are going to be really exciting in future chapters. Of course, we'll have to wait and see, but given that the game is free, I highly recommend you take a trip down to Indigo Park.